Welcome back, viewers. It's James Comrie, half-assed reporter, the guy on the bike, and we are on the Upper East Side at the Guggenheim Museum for a very special historical exhibition. Stay tuned. Wow, well, we went through security. We got checked out. This is the last weekend of this fantastic show. Harmony and Dissonance, Orphism in Paris, 1910 to 1930. And, oh baby, the Goog is crowded today. But this is our last chance to see the show. Harmony and Dissonance. Okay, well, I've been trying to get in to see this show for 2 months. And between the bad weather, personal things that are involved with having an exhibition and being in several other shows and suddenly having people interested in my studio practice, I've had to take a break. And then I saw this was the last weekend. I said, I can't stop anymore. I got to go see the show. Also, I haven't had time to download all the information, so I'm going to kind of freelance this. This is a Robert Delaunay painting, 1910, 1911. So this is when he was still into kind of a pointillist, although it was digital pointillism. Looks like these are square pixels. Okay, so here is the main explanation for the beginning. You can pause your computer and look at that. Okay, here is the large gallery. This is called Localization of Graphic Motifs by František Kupka. Well, one of the reasons I was excited about seeing this show is, as you know, I'm an art history nerd, and Orphism was one of those short-lived art movements in Paris, in the hot house of Paris in the early part of the 20th century, and also there are a lot of fantastic artists that have kind of fallen into obscurity, and Kupka might be one of them. The mystical and the scientific were not incompatible with František Kupka, nor for many of his peers. Although Kupka's interest in occult philosophy began during his youth, his engagement with scientific currents and discoveries thrived following his move to Paris in 1896. There he attended lectures in physics, biology, and other sciences, saw early film, and studied color theory. Oh boy, this is an example of why I came here. This is Sonia Delaunay from 1914. And you've probably seen this reproduced at least a dozen times in all of your art history books. But, gosh, it's something else to see the piece in real life. So I'm in Paris, and I saw a massive Sonia Delaunay show. This piece is titled Electric Prisms. Let's see, 1914. And I would estimate this piece is at least something like a 9-foot square, maybe 10-foot square. Oil on canvas. Anyway, well, I still have the catalog, and I've always had a lot of respect for Sonia Delaunay, and in certain ways I even think that she might be more talented than her husband, Robert. So this is a Robert Delaunay, and I often wonder why they hang them like this in this space, but I guess that's their prerogative. Oh, this is another wonderful piece. This is Francis Picabia. Ed Teledonisel. Picabia, 1913. I actually saw this piece at the Art Institute of Chicago, and they were doing some retouching on this. I think this is probably one of the 2 or 3 massive pieces that Picabia did in response to coming to the United States for their Army show in 1913, and he got so pumped up that he went back. I believe he was in France and made at least 2 or 3 massive pieces. I would say this probably could be something like 12 by 11 feet, 11 by 11, something big painting. Also, actually, I'm glad they did the retouching. It looks very fresh. Also, as I understand it, this painting was in his studio for many years, and then in the late 40s, I think Marcel Duchamp came along and was saying, gee, whatever happened to that, or those huge paintings you did back in 1913? And they sort of looked around the studio and found them and restretched them and touched them up, and I think Duchamp may have had something to do with getting them placed at the Art Institute. This is Paul Signat, Opus 217. And this is kind of an interesting addition. You would think that Signat would be part of another period. The Pointillists, Post-Impressionists. This is Walsey Kandinsky, Improvisation number 28, 1912. One of the poignant ironies or coincidences of this show is that it's dealing with a lot of people that became considered the founders of abstract art. Kandinsky, Kupka, some other people. And it was, gosh, a show about, at this point, 8 years ago, the Hilma af Klint exhibition. That was maybe the most highly attended exhibition ever in the history of the Guggenheim Museum. Kind of set a precedence, but at that point, a lot of people didn't know about Hilma af Klint and the fact that she had been making abstract paintings long before Kandinsky or Kupka or anybody else. And so this is kind of covering that ground. Well, so they're talking about the title Orphism and where it came from. The poet Guilbert Apollinaire came up with the name. He was kind of a Hermeticist and poet. He and Picasso and Barak and some other people used to hang out and cause mischief. It's titled In Cour 1910. It's another one of the Robert Delaunay paintings that you've probably seen reproduced 1,000 times in art history books. Anyway, Apollinaire and Picasso and the Delanays were hanging out, and Apollinaire wrote at least one book I know about kind of the theories of what was happening in Paris in the late aughts and early teens, and wrote about Cubism and some other things, Futurism. This is by Marc Chagall, 2011. Interestingly, it's like the Eiffel Tower is almost an icon of this age. This is red Eiffel Tower. Well, I was talking about how the Orphists and Hilma af Klint and some of these people really started to make a break into true abstraction. So the Cubists were kind of fragmenting reality. The Futurists had kind of taken that and speeded it up. But it wasn't until the Orphists came along that everyone kind of tried to throw out the whole idea of reality and go to a totally...
You, sir, are a menace.
Sometimes I don't get such a good response. This is Marcel Duchamp, Nude Study. That's where I thought it was Sad Young Man on a Train. And I never really thought of Duchamp as a colorist, but he was going towards pure abstraction. More Duchamp. He's calling this The Bride, and I think that a lot of this is working up to his masterpiece, The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelors, even. It's got a lot of kind of these mechanical parts in here. I think he also influenced Picabia a lot in what Picabia eventually started doing was his mechanomorphs. Duchamp. The passage from Virgin to Bride. (1912). Francis Picabia, The Sad Visage. So this is from the same period as the large piece down in the main gallery. I'm a big Picabia fan, and there's going to be a major exhibition of his late works. I guess it might have been in Paris, but it's coming to the Hauserworth Gallery in Chelsea next month. I like the idea of Picabia kind of changing styles. Somebody said he changed his styles as often as some people change their shirts. But he was an ambitious painter. Here we've got a couple of works by Ferdinand Léger, The Smokers. Again, another artist that kind of momentarily pass through, or at least that they're kind of categorizing as someone peripherally attached or aware of Orphism. This is 1912, also Ligier, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the knife grinder. You know, I love to see these old paintings and how they've aged. Okay, this is homage to Roulement Apollinaire by Marc Chagall. And the wall text talks about how Chagall and Apollinaire shared a lot of personal features. They were both kind of displaced Eastern Europeans who came to Paris. So we've got some references to poets, and the Walden had a gallery in Berlin called Der Sturm. Also, it's interesting, it looks like a lot of this is metallic gold and silver paint. We've got a bay of later works by Kupka. It's titled Red and Blue Discs. 1912. We're getting to the part of the show where they really are trying to bring out the experimental and new art theories, color theories in this. So they're calling this Discs of Newton. And as we all know, Sir Isaac Newton was the first person to use a prism to break down the color spectrum of actual light. More Robert Delaunay. I like this piece. So you could obviously use the orifice designs on your skateboard deck. Simultaneous windows, second motif, 1912. Cardiff team, 1912. Well, Robert has still got some figures in there, and he's got a little airplane flying overhead. Some text, which I like. So he hasn't totally broken away from kind of cubism that was happening in Paris at the time. This Dancer in a Cafe by Jean Metzinger. One of the great cubists that was not Picasso or Braque. I think Metzinger also wrote some theses on the whole theory of cubism, which Picasso and Braque did not do. And, well, one of the reasons I was interested in seeing the show is they really cast a wide net, so they've got a lot of people that were around the margins of Orphism. Okay, that's great. More Picabia. This is titled Physical Culture. And I think he went to a wrestling match. You may have been in New York and saw that, and this is what the wrestling match inspired. Well, we've got some sculpture here. Alexander Archipenko. It's titled Medrano. It's like mixed medium wood, metal, and leather. And I would estimate that that's about 54 inches by 24 inches by 20 inches. Sonia Delaunay, Red Bowler, 1912. Okay, so that's an interesting horizontal format. As I was coming up here, I'm looking at this and thinking this could be by Marca, the German artist, or even Paul Klee. You can see where they're kind of the boundaries of Orphism is slipping over into other countries like Germany and Czechoslovakia, Holland. Okay, so we've got a bay that's mostly Sonia Delaunay and some of her experimental pieces. And she was a wonderful collage artist. When the Swiss-born writer Laios Sandrars moved to Paris in 1912, he befriended members of the Parisian avant-garde associated with Orphism, particularly Guillaume Apollinaire and the Delaunays. This first simultaneous book, a collaboration between Sonia Delaunay and Sandrars, features her painting running down the left side of the page, inspired by his poem, set in multicolor type on the right side. And also, Sonia was a wonderful textile designer, graphic designer, and this box is an example of the kind of work she was doing that kind of went beyond the paintings or the 2D. This is Leopold Servage. Colored rhythms. Well, they've talked about this in some of the wall text, but I think it's a lot of fun to think about the overlap of the ideas of mysticism, Hermeticism, Madame Blavatsky, and then trying to come up with a scientific explanation. There's a selection of works on paper by Kupka. It's pastel, but I think it really shows the kind of the breadth and the amazing numbers of compositional ideas and ontological ideas that Kupka was working with. I think this is gouache. Also, a lot of this stuff looks very contemporary. You could probably transpose this into some new medium and everybody would think that it came out yesterday. Okay, so this is titled Paris Through the Window by Marc Chagall. And it's kind of standard Chagall, except we do have some colors over there. We've got the red, yellow, and blue. We've got another Archipenko sculpture. Oh, you made a drawing? That's beautiful. Curcel Pirouette by Archipenko. More Delaunay, 1913. I would say that that was probably his peak. I mean, he did a lot of things after that, and a lot of it got to be very big, but as far as the ideas go, I think this is probably the essence of it. Also, I think that he was in touch with Kandinsky, talking about color theory and spiritualism in art. Robert Delaunay, Supreme Disc, 1913. I guess this kind of says it all. And it would be interesting to pair these up with some of the paintings that Hilma Alfgren was doing about the same time. Wonderful colors. This is Natalie Goncharova. I was wondering when we would slip her over into some of the Russian futurists, maybe. The beginning of Russian suprematism, Russian formalism. More Sonia electric prisms. Okay, well, I was wondering when we were going to get to this part of the show. These are the synchronist artists. I believe this is Morgan Russell. Now, these were a couple of American artists that went to Paris, met the Delaunays, were very influenced by them. I guess they spent maybe a couple of years there studying. This is Stanton Macdonald-Wright. Came back to New York about the same time as the Armour Show, and were the first, or considered the first, avant-garde art movement. Oh, you'll never believe who this is. This is Thomas Hart Benton. And, well, he was a young modernist abstract painter for a while, but found his calling in the regionalism and kind of American propaganda end of things. Okay, another masterpiece that you would never see if they didn't have a show like this. This is David Bomberg, titled In the Head. And David Bomberg was one of the great British painters, but I think he only worked on this kind of abstraction for a few years. This is a big painting. I would say that that's probably about 7 by 8 feet, something like that. I read an art blog the other day, or maybe it was an Instagram post by Dan Cameron, who was the curator at the New Museum for many years, and he said that he'd seen a few David Bomberg paintings and never understood why they considered him such a major artist. And then he said, I saw this painting, and that's when I knew he was good. Really fantastic. Oh, another great outlier. This is Patrick Henry Bruce, one of the very interesting American modernists, American abstract painters. And you don't get a chance to see his work very often, especially not the early period. At some point, he kind of converted to things that were more like still lives. But this is a beautiful piece, and He says that he lived or spent a lot of his time in Paris, but at some point, here's the tragic part, he moved back to New York and was living with his sister down around 69th Street and Madison Avenue, and committed suicide. I believe that's Marsden Hartley. Yes, this is Marsden Hartley, and it's simply titled Abstraction. I think one of the things I appreciate about the Americans in this is that it's just so blunt. And you can see that this is kind of a harbinger of his German paintings, his German officer paintings. This is some great ephemera. So this is a poster for the Synchromists show, the Bernheim Juan, November 1913. He's saying these are Morgan Russell paintings. Oh, this is a little gem. Yes, when I came to New York, there was an artist I admired a lot named Bruce Boyce who did a series of paintings. I think he was much inspired by the Synchromists, but he did a bunch of paintings that were kind of 4 paintings bound together. Nice. Oh, and here is a Synchromist poster for the Neue Kunstsalon München. So now we're getting to 1914 and First World War I. The First World War is taking off. Giacomo Ballo, Apollo posing before the sun. So Ballo was a very well-known, popular futurist. Stanton Macdonald-Wright, watercolor and ink on paper, 1914. I guess they're saying a lot of the people who were in Europe decided to come back home. I know that Stan Macdonald-Wright eventually ended up going back out to California, and I think he had a house in the Palisades. I'm always wondering whether that burned in the recent conflagration out there. Okay, so we've got another Italian futurist here, Gino Cervini. I like the lozenge format here. And again, it's kind of questionable about where does the futurism stop and the Orphism begin. There's another Stanton Macdonald-Wright. This is 1914. It's a little more toned down color thing. Stanton Macdonald-Wright. Okay, Franz Marc. This is where we get into the tragic parts. I think Franz Marc was killed in World War I think early in the conflict. I would assume this is a Kupka, the colored one. Okay, this whole bay is Albert Gleis's, and this is Brooklyn Bridge. I guess Gleisis came to New York after serving in World War I. And I guess there was a lot of stuff happening there. I know that Picabia and Duchamp also came to New York about 1915-16. More Albert Gleisis. I would say this, to me, is more kind of standard cubism. Kind of a still life there. Beautiful painting. Also Gleisis. 1915. It's like a standing figure. Oh, we've got some textured areas in there. Eduardo Vianney, Uprising of the Dolls. Sonia Delaunay, Pegasus Market. I was wondering if this was based on some kind of Greek myth, but then I'm looking at it and realizing this is probably a market that was around the corner from where Sonia's studio was, and she'd probably go there shopping for melons and cantaloupe, tomatoes. Amadeo de Souza-Cardoso. And we've got some smaller studies by Armando here. These are beautiful. This is a Robert Delaunay, but this is from 1931. They're calling it Discs and Circles. And I like it. He's gotten a little more body in the paint. And this is a Kupka. Divertimento 1, and this is 1935, so we're talking 21, 22 years after the initial movement. Oh, and here's a Kupka gouache on paper. This is Albert Gleisis, painting for contemplation, dominated by green and gold. And this is 1942. I actually like this period of Gleisis's work. There's a couple pieces by Mainie Jellett. I've got a catalog of her work that I picked up in the return bins at the Strand about 20 years ago. She was from Dublin, and this is also very good, but it kind of relates to the Glycis paintings. Pretty dark and rich palette. Again, more late Delaunay, circular forms, 1930. I believe this is the last painting in the show. I think it's intriguing that Delaunay was able to come up with an idea and he stuck with it for basically from 1911-12 until he died, which I believe was in the early 40s. And well, he was able to come up with new ideas, different ways of painting, and play with his basic concepts in a lot of very interesting ways. So this is James Kalm reporting on Harmony and Dissonance, Orphism in Paris, 1910 to 1930. You can like this, share, link it up to all your social media sites. You can talk about it. And you can leave your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, reviews, and suggestions below. But as we always do in the 19 years that we've been posting these videos, we just ask you to say, please, thank you, Kate.
I get more exposure.
Well, thank you, West 4th Trio. Thank you.